My name is Aliza. I am 23 years old, and life has already shown me the darkest side of reality. 5 years ago, I was a young wife, full of dreams, living in a small house with my husband and our little son, Hamza. I thought my life would always stay safe inside those walls, but destiny had a different plan. My husband was only 28 when he passed away suddenly. One morning, he went to work, and in the evening I got the news. He was gone forever. In one moment, my whole world shattered. I became a widow at just 23. I had a 3-year-old son clinging to me, asking, "Mama, where is Papa?" I had no answer. At first, people came to our house with tears and words of sympathy. Neighbors, relatives, even distant friends filled our rooms. They said, "We are here for you, Aliza. Don't worry." But as days turned into weeks, those people disappeared. Their words were only words. No one stayed to help a young widow struggling to survive. My husband's job gave me a small amount of money as support, but it was gone within months. Bills piled up, rent became due, and I had no income. I had never worked outside before, but now I had no choice. I started working as a maid in people's houses, washing dishes, scrubbing floors, and cooking food for others while my own child sometimes went hungry. But the hardest part of my new life was not the poverty. It was the way people looked at me. When you are a young widow, people don't see your pain. They see your body. They see your weakness. They see an opportunity. At first, it was small things. The landlord would come to collect the rent and stand too close. His eyes scanned me in ways that made me shiver. He would say, "Aliza, you are too young to live alone. You need a man to take care of you." His smile was not kind. It was sharp, cutting, full of hidden meaning. One evening, when I told him I didn't have enough rent, he leaned closer and whispered, "There are other ways to pay, you know." My heart stopped. I quickly closed the door, trembling, holding Hamza in my arms. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls of my own house felt unsafe. At work, it was no different. Some men in the houses where I cleaned would stare at me while I bent to pick things up. One day, a man, accidentally, brushed his hand against mine and said with a smile, "You work so hard, Aliza. You must get lonely at night." Lonely. That word burned inside me. Did they think my loneliness was an invitation? Did they think being a widow made me an easy target? I came home late that night, my body aching, my spirit crushed. Hamza was asleep on the floor, waiting for me. I sat beside him, stroked his hair, and cried silently. I wanted to scream, to ask the world, is this what a widow deserves? To be seen as weak, as cheap, as someone's secret pleasure? But I had no voice. If I spoke out, people would blame me. They would say, "Aliza must have encouraged them. Why else would men behave like that?" The worst part was when even so-called family friends changed. One relative visited me often after my husband's death. At first, he brought groceries and spoke kindly. I thought he was genuinely helping us. But slowly his words changed. One night he said, "Aliza, you are still young. You need love. I can make you happy again." I froze. His hand reached toward mine. My chest tightened. My body screamed to run. I pulled back and said firmly, "Please leave." He looked at me with anger and said, "Don't act innocent. Without me, how will you survive?" That night, I locked the door and hugged Hamza tightly. his small arms wrapped around my neck, his innocent voice asking, "Mama, why are you crying?" How could I explain to a child that his mother's world was full of shadows? Days turned into months. My routine was simple: wake up early, prepare Hamza for school, then work in 3 different houses till evening. My body grew weaker, but I kept pushing, not for myself, but for him. But no matter where I went, the same whispers, the same stares, the same offers followed me. At 23, my beauty, which should have been a blessing, became a curse. Men thought my smile was an invitation, my silence was agreement, my struggles were a chance to take advantage. I began covering myself even more, avoiding eye contact, speaking less. Still, it didn't stop. Once, while returning home at night, a group of young men followed me down the street, calling out dirty jokes. I held Hamza's hand tightly and walked faster, my heart pounding. That night I realized how unsafe I truly was. Hamza was only 8 then, but he noticed. He would hold my hand protectively, saying, "Mama, don't worry. I will grow up and take care of you." His innocent words gave me strength, but deep down, I was breaking. The world saw me as a widow, a weak woman, an object. Only my son saw me as a mother. Only he understood my pain. But this is not the end of my story, because even in the darkest struggles, light can appear. Hamza, my little boy, would grow up to become more than I could ever imagine. And that is where my life began to change. After years of living in fear, humiliation, and endless work, I slowly accepted that this was my life. My body was tired, but my spirit refused to die because I had one reason to keep moving forward: my son, Hamza. Hamza was no longer a small child. By the time he turned 12, I could see something strong in his eyes, something beyond his age. He had watched me suffer. He had seen the landlord's dirty stares, the neighbors' whispers, and the cruel jokes on the streets. He knew, even as a child, that his mother lived in a world that was not safe. One evening, when I returned home late after cleaning 3 houses, I found Hamza waiting outside the door. He ran to me and said, "Mama, I'll never let anyone hurt you again. One day, I'll become strong, and you'll never have to cry." I smiled through my tears, but inside I wondered, how can a boy carry such a heavy promise? But Hamza was not like others. He studied harder than anyone in his class. When other children played, he read. When they laughed, he worked. Sometimes he stayed hungry so that I could eat. Once, when I told him to spend the little pocket money I gave him on snacks, he saved it instead. Later, I found that he had used it to buy me new shoes, because mine were broken. He was only a boy, but already he was becoming the man his father could not live long enough to be. Still, life kept testing us. One afternoon, I was cleaning the floor in a house when the owner, a middle-aged man, came and stood behind me. I felt his shadow before I even saw him. He said softly, "Aliza, why do you work so hard? If you were mine, you wouldn't need to lift a finger." I froze. His hand touched my shoulder. My stomach twisted with fear. I pushed his hand away and said, "Please, respect yourself and me." He smirked and whispered, "Respect? Respect doesn't fill your stomach. Think about it." I left the house shaking. When I reached home, Hamza noticed my tears. He didn't ask questions, but that night I heard him whisper to himself, "One day, Mama, I'll make them all regret it." That was the day I realized something. While society was trying to break me, it was shaping my son into steel. Years passed. Hamza entered high school and continued to shine. His teachers loved him for his discipline. One teacher, Mr. Farhan, noticed his potential and often encouraged him. "Hamza, you're not just bright, you're special. You can change lives, starting with your mother's." Hamza took those words seriously. He began tutoring younger kids after school, earning small amounts of money. Instead of spending it on himself, he would quietly put it in my hand. "Mama, buy something for yourself," he would say with a smile. Sometimes, when I was too exhausted to cook, Hamza would prepare simple meals. He even learned to sew buttons on his shirt so that I didn't have to. In every action, he was protecting me, lifting me, loving me, not just as a son, but as the only man of the house. By the time he was 16, he had won a scholarship to study abroad. The day we received the acceptance letter, I held it in trembling hands. My tears fell onto the paper. Hamza hugged me tightly and whispered, "Mama, your struggle ends here, I promise." The night before his flight, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of all the days we had gone hungry, all the insults, all the unwanted hands that had tried to touch me, all the nights I cried into my pillow. And now, my son was leaving to build a new life, a life born from all that pain. In the airport, as Hamza hugged me one last time, he said, "Mama, you've been both mother and father to me. You never gave up. Now, let me fight for you." When he left, I felt both empty and full at the same time. Months later, he called me from abroad. His voice was filled with joy. "Mama, I got a part-time job. I'll send money home every month." And he did. For the first time in years, I didn't have to scrub floors or beg landlords for mercy. Slowly, our house changed. We bought furniture. We filled the kitchen with food. Hamza kept sending more, saying, "Mama, I want you to rest." Years went by, and Hamza graduated with honors. When he finally came home, he was not the little boy I once carried. He was tall, confident, and proud. In his hand was a job contract. He had been offered a high-paying position. The day he returned, our house was filled with relatives who once ignored us. They smiled, they congratulated, they pretended they had always cared. But Hamza didn't care about them. He only cared about me. He hugged me tightly and whispered, "Mama, we made it. This house is yours. Your tears are finished." At that moment, I realized something. Society had tried to break me with poverty, with abuse, with dirty looks and dirty offers. But it failed. Why? Because love, pure, innocent love between a mother and her son, was stronger than all of it. Hamza didn't just give me money. He gave me dignity back. Widows are not weak, they are survivors. But society often sees them as objects instead of human beings. People must understand that behind every widow is not just a woman, but a mother, a sister, a daughter, someone who deserves respect, not exploitation. And sometimes, the greatest strength comes not from outsiders, but from the children they raise with love and sacrifice. Hamza's story is proof. One act of compassion, one child's determination can rebuild a broken family. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel Pro English Stories for more interesting stories.